The first time I became aware of anything was wrong was when I reviewed applications for scholarships for the fifth time that week. My name is Robert Anderson, and I have been working at Lincoln High School as its principal for the last 23 years. It is my life, my passion, and my purpose. Every child that gets through those doors is my responsibility, my problem, and my future. That morning, Sarah Mitchell came to my office, tears staining her face. Sarah was one of our best students, one of the smartest and brightest minds that graduated from our school in the last decade. She had a 4.0 GPA and was on her way to being valedictorian. She had overcome poverty and family trauma to get to where she was. Sarah had applied for the Morrison Scholarship, our school's most prestigious award, with no success so far. It was Richard Morrison's scholarship, the board president's son, and one of the city's founding fathers. Again, Robert, this is the third time I have applied for this scholarship, and I have no idea why I am not passing, she whispered as the letter of acceptance denial hit my hands. I looked at the letter, formal and cold as it was signed by Richard Morrison himself, and understood that something was terribly wrong. There had to be a reason Sarah, one of our brightest minds, had not received the scholarship. Insufficient funds was not a reason, especially when, from my knowledge, the Morrison Scholarship Fund had gotten over $200,000 in donations that year alone. I put the letter on my desk, looked at Sarah, and saw determination in her eyes. I looked at the letter again and saw something else entirely. Give me some time, Sarah. I promise you I will get to the bottom of this, was all I said before she left my office, her hope fading with every step. Something inside me snapped that day, and I knew with absolute certainty that I had to uncover the truth about the Morrison Scholarship and those who did not receive it. For the first time in my life, I was not disappointed. I was angry. I called my assistant principal, James Parker, a young and competent man in his early 40s with whom I shared a friendly relationship. He answered the call at the first ring. Get me everything you can get on the Morrison Scholarship Fund, James. Every paper, every note, every transaction, every goddamn detail, and do it without telling a soul, I said, my voice steady and resolute. Why? What are you talking about, Robert? I do not know yet, but I will find out, I said before hanging up on him. That night I could not rest. I sat in my study, the rejection letters of other students lying before me, and contemplated my next step. Children's hopes and dreams were being crushed because of someone's greed. I decided then and there that I would not walk away, that I would not leave it at that I would dig until I found the truth. And when I did, I would make sure that nobody would ever be able to take away the dreams of our children ever again. Morning came, and as expected, James was waiting for me in my office. Robert, you need to see this, he said, pale as he handed me a thick folder. It took me a few minutes to realize what was in it. Statements of the Morrison Scholarship Fund, donations, and awards made over the last 5 years. See if anything seems odd to you, he added. At first, everything looked good. The donations were pouring in, and the scholarship was giving out awards to deserving students. But then I saw them. Did you see those? I asked him, showing him the transactions. James looked at them, and his face turned white. Robert, those are huge withdrawals, he whispered, and I knew then and there that James was afraid. Where is this money going? This is going to Richard Morrison's private account, I said, showing him the statements. This is happening for 5 years, James, and none of us knew about it. James was about to say something when the next set of documents caught my eye. They were all the award statements. The ones Morrison Scholarship Fund was supposed to give to the children who won the scholarship. What do you think those are? I asked James, and he looked at the documents, his face pale as he realized what they were. Those are forgeries, he said, his voice shaking, and I think now I know why. Morrison must have falsified those rejection letters so that the parents and the students would think that their children did not win the scholarship. But he was taking the money for himself all along. I sat in my chair, processing this information when James added, "The letters that were sent, Robert, were not the ones that were supposed to be sent. They were forged ones. Morrison must have changed them so that none of the students would know he was taking their money. They lied to the children, James," I said, my heart heavy with grief. Told them they did not deserve the scholarship when in fact Morrison took it from them. The weight of it all was crushing, but I knew I had to do what was right. "Let us go public with this, James. We have enough proof for that." "No, Robert, not yet," said James. "If you go public, he will spin the accusations right back at you. But we need to expose him in front of the press and the board of directors. The meeting is in 2 weeks, and I think we should wait for that." "You are right, James," I said, "but if he pulls anything, we do it now, do you understand?" "I will, Robert, but are you sure about this? Because Morrison has powerful friends, and he may come after you." James looked at me, concern etched on his face. "He may ruin your career, Robert." I looked at the documents before me, and then at the smiling faces of the children who had been robbed of their dreams and replied, "I have nothing to lose, James, but those children have everything to gain." The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life, and every day I woke up, I knew I had to do this. James and I spent hours upon hours preparing evidence that would prove once and for all that Richard Morrison was a thief and a greedy bastard. I had to see justice done, but most of all, I had to see those children's dreams fulfilled despite what had happened to them. However, the thing that was hardest for me was looking at those children and their grieving parents in their eyes. Sarah Mitchell would occasionally pass by my office and ask me how I was. Still, I could not tell her the truth. It had to come out in due time, and when that time came, it would come. 3 days before the board meeting, Richard Morrison called me into his office. He welcomed me as he always did, but the smile on his face was not genuine. "I heard you have been looking into the Morrison Scholarship Fund, Robert," he said, and I could not help but despise the man even more. "Rest assured that everything there is perfectly legal and above board." I forced a smile, my heart hammering in my chest. "I am only looking out for the best interests of our students, Richard. You are such a good man, Robert. But sometimes we have to understand that some things in this world are not entirely fair or justified," Richard said, and I understood what he meant by that. He was warning me to leave well enough alone. "I understand, Richard," was all I said as I left his office. James was waiting for me when I got back to my office. "Robert, the meeting is in 2 weeks, and I think you should be ready." "I will, James, but for now, let us prepare that evidence for presentation, shall we?" The next morning, I put on my best suit and walked into the school board's office, where the meeting would commence. The press was already waiting for me, along with many parents and teachers. Richard Morrison greeted me as he always did, beaming with false joy and offering his hand in a mock handshake. He did not know what was coming, but I was prepared. As the meeting commenced, Richard gave a long-winded speech about how grateful he was for the support of the parents and board members in establishing the scholarship fund. As he spoke, I watched his face carefully, knowing he was lying to every one of them. Afterward, as he concluded his speech, it was my turn to speak. I stepped to the podium and looked out at the crowd of faces that had trusted me all these years. "Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming," I said before continuing. "Today, I am going to talk about the Morrison Scholarship Fund, but not in the way you expected. Today, I am going to show you the truth about the Morrison Scholarship Fund, the students who applied for it, and the greedy bastard who runs it." Murmurs of discontent rippled through the crowd as Richard's smile disappeared. "What are you talking about, Robert?" He growled at me, his face red with rage. I looked out at the sea of faces before me and said, "For the last 5 years, the Morrison Scholarship Fund has been stealing from the students who applied for it. Over $200,000 from donations was transferred to Richard Morrison's private account." Gasps of shock and outrage rang throughout the room as several parents turned to glare daggers at Richard. "This is absurd," he shouted, his face as red as a tomato. "You have no proof of that." "I have plenty of proof," I said, holding up the documents that would finally bring Richard Morrison down. "Here is proof of those withdrawals from the scholarship fund. And here is proof that Morrison falsified those rejection letters and took the money for himself. Here is proof that those children deserved the scholarships but were not given them. And here is proof that, when their parents complained, nothing was ever done about it." I turned to look at Sarah Mitchell, who was sitting in the crowd with tears streaming down her face. Sarah was our valedictorian. She deserved the scholarship more than anyone, but she was not given it. She was told she was not good enough for it when, in fact, she was chosen for it. Her letter was never sent to her. The room exploded into chaos as I continued. "This is not the only one of those forgeries. They were forged so that the parents would think that their children were not awarded. They were robbed of their dreams right before their eyes. The parents yelled, the teachers murmured, the reporters pushed forward with their cameras, and finally the police arrived. I had called them last night. I thought as they cuffed Morrison and took him away. His face was as pale as chalk, and I do not think he ever expected to be arrested that day. In the following weeks, everything would change. The fund would be given to the children, and eventually they would all move on with their lives. Sarah Mitchell would be attending her dream university. David Chen would become an engineer, and Jasmine Williams would become a doctor. Still, I knew the cost of exposing Richard Morrison and what I would pay for it. Morrison's friends would be coming after me, and many parents would blame me for lying about it. But it was a price I was more than willing to pay. In the end, I would gain something more precious to me than my reputation, Sarah's future, or David's hopes and dreams. I would gain the respect of every child in that school who knew I fought for them and made sure that they had a future, despite what happened to them. When I look back on that day, I realize now that leadership is not about popularity or power but truth, and most importantly, integrity.